As we hear this story from Jesus, I think you probably counted 8 abide or abides times that Jesus says this. He's really trying to make a point that remaining in Him, of Him being with us, is part of our journey of faith, that He stays, remains, abides with us. One of the words that I think about when I think about being in a place, I think somebody told me once to park myself in a chair, or to park myself over there. And this is what we do when we go someplace with a car, right? Here we have theme parks, and we have events downtown, and there are restaurants we can go to, or whatever those different kinds of journeys we can make to go be in a place with other people. We have to take that trip, and then we park the car, and the car stays in that place. So as Jesus talks about abiding, we might think about parking ourselves in a space with other people, but that also implies that we have to first show up to be able to park. We have to be present to be able to abide in those relationships with others. Now, there are lots of ways that we can get to other places. Personally, one of the things that stresses me out when I have to go do something, if I know that parking is going to be a problem, I often don't want to go. When we used to live in St. Louis, there was this big art festival in the county seat every year. And as it was time to go, we had never been. And one year my wife said, let's go. And we drove to the art festival, and I drove all around for about 10 or 15 minutes. And when I didn't find a parking spot, I said, that's it, we're not going. And now, if you ask me to go to that same thing, I would probably just say, nope, there's not enough parking. If you ask me to go to an event or to a game or to a concert or to a theme park, my first question is always going to be, what am I going to eat? But my second question is always going to be, am I going to be able to park? Because it really stresses me out. Now, as we get into this story and Jesus is inviting us to abide, to park, to be present, we also get a couple of tough verses. In the second verse, it says that God's going to remove the branches. I think I read it and said remember, but it's remove the branches that don't bear fruit. And then later it said those branches in verse 6 will be cast off and withered and burned up. Now, those are some tough words to hear, that God might somehow be disconnecting us from the abiding, but I don't think God actually has to do that, because we are quite good ourselves at cutting off our opportunities to be parked together in human community. Now, there's lots of ways that we are invited into human community, and really, we have plenty of opportunities, maybe not as much in the pandemic, but outside of that, we have plenty of opportunities to be present together as human beings. There are times where we gather as families, as neighbors, as the church, and there are often invitations offered. And whether those are personal invitations or big, broad invites that go out, there are many, many ways that we can gather in human community. And often, we choose ourselves not to take advantage of those opportunities. And there are a variety of reasons that we do that. To be fair, sometimes those opportunities are not safe spaces for us, and it's good for us to not make the trip, not go park in that place where harm is going to happen to us. But many times, the invitations we get are not going to be harmful to us, and we have reasons yet that we choose not to go. I've already shared that if parking's going to be a challenge, I don't want to be there. If a place is going to be crowded, I also generally am not going to want to go. Sometimes it's just busyness. We get an invite to be with people, to be the church, to be neighbors, and we already have things in our schedule. Or we forget to put it on our calendar, and we just don't make the trip to go be in that place where we can park with other people. Sometimes it's fear, anxiety, people we don't want to be around, shyness. There's all sorts of reasons that we as people kind of look at a gathering and say, oh, I don't know if I can go do that. Meeting new people can be hard. Being around whole groups of people that we don't know can make some of us uncomfortable. Then there are a whole nother set of reasons that we might not make the trip, and that's just that it doesn't always feel like it's a good spending of our time. The number of times I've heard people say about an event or a gathering, a community, to say, that was a waste of time, or I didn't get anything out of that, or what's in it for me? Why would I even show up? And there's more reasons that we don't make the trip to go be together in community, to abide together, to park together in relationship. And I wonder if we were to dig down under them, how many of them come back to that same kind of space that we're just not sure if it's something we want to do, something that's going to be good for us, something that feels like it's uplifting for us, somehow lands in that space of, is this worth my time? Is this worth my attention? What am I going to get out of it? My experience has been in my own life that when something is uplifting and life-giving and I get something out of it, it's much easier to say yes to that than something that is a little bit more challenging to be present in, right? If it's long and tedious and tiring, or if there are people there that are challenging for me, whatever those things are, it's much easier to say no if it's not something that feels like I'm going to get something out of it. But when we come to this gospel text today, there's an important thing we need to distinguish. For all of those 8 abide in me or abides, there's a whole bunch of yous that go with it. I abide in you, you abide in me. And we can hear that as people in our American culture that is so individualized, as if Jesus is talking directly to us, right? Like, I abide in you, and you, and you, and you, and you, and you, and you are supposed to abide in me. And then that becomes some kind of work that we have to do, right? Jesus is saying to us, you have to make the trip and go park with those other people, and you have to do that. The reality is, though, we're here in the South, and I, coming from the Midwest, had to be taught that the plural of you is not y'all, but all y'all. And this actually, every one of the yous in this text that goes with all of this abiding are all y'alls. They're all in the plural. Jesus is not saying to each individual, I abide in you, and you have to abide in me. It's rather, I abide in all y'all, and all y'all, the whole, is going then to abide in me. And this should do a couple of things for us. One, it's greatly freeing because there are plenty of times when we will fail at abiding on our own. Plenty of times when we say no to the invitation. Plenty of times when we can't muster the energy to take the trip, to be in human community, to park in those places. But for every one of those that we can't get to, there is someone else who's able to say yes and to be present and to park in that place. So it takes the pressure off of us that we have to do this on our own, because it's really all of the whole that Jesus abides in, this gift of church that we have been given. The other thing, though, it can invite us to do is ask a different question. If when we have opportunities to dwell in human community, all of our responses grow out of a place of kind of what's in it for me and what am I going to get out of it, it's very easy to say no and to not be present when the answers come back in places where we're not comfortable, or we're going to get stretched, or where we'd rather not be. But there's a different question. All through this text, in addition to the abiding, Jesus is talking about bearing fruit. And generally in Scripture, bearing fruit is about the good works we do for others. And so instead of asking about any particular gathering that we might make a journey to and park in and abide in that place, instead of asking what's in it for me, a different question we might ask is, what can I bring? What do I bring to the table? What happens when my presence is a part of this gathering that we go to? And it doesn't even have to be that we have words of wisdom or particular gifts to offer. It simply can be that we show up and abide, that we show up and park in that place and be with those people. When my mom was in the hospital dying 8 years ago now, I went to church on a Sunday morning, and I found that I didn't have the words. The words would not come out of my mouth, words that I have known all my life. And a little bit into the worship service, one of my mom's dear friends, Margaret, whose kids I grew up with, came and sat down right next to me. And she had all the words, and she carried me through worship. It wasn't that she brought this ton of wisdom and all that. She was just saying the words of worship, but it was that presence that mattered in this time when I was so disconnected from my ability to be in this space of worship. She could have shown up and worshiped that morning and asked the question, what's in this for me today? Is the music going to be the ones that I want to sing? Or how is this going to land? And I don't know that she consciously asked the question, what can my presence bring? But she brought her presence and sat next to me, and it made all the difference in the world. So in Jesus saying that he abides in us, and that we can go and bear fruit, there is this great opportunity to know that it is in all of us that Jesus abides, and that we can then ask the question about our own presence, right? To say, instead of what's in it for me, what can I bring? And that can make all of the difference in human community as we just show up. Again, we will fail at this often as individuals. We won't be able to get over the things that stop us from parking with or even making the journey to be present with others. But this is where the order of what Jesus talks about matters. Jesus doesn't say, when all y'all get your act together, I will abide with you. No, he says, as I abide in you. It's already happening. He says in this word, you have already been cleaned, cleansed by my words. So Jesus has already done that work. We might think of the Christmas story as Jesus making the trip to be with us and to park among us as human people. When Jesus was headed toward the cross, every excuse we have for not showing up and making the trip would have applied to that cross, right? It was uncomfortable, it was painful, it was death, it was all this terrible stuff, and Jesus made the trip anyway and abided in that place until he could come to the new place of new life where he parks in the resurrection, parks in that space of new life and makes space for us there to park as well. So that all the abiding that we do, all of the being present that we do, grows out of Jesus first being present with us. He is present with us on the worst days, even if we can't see that, right? When the grief of the world, when the struggles and the pain is more than we can handle, he is present with us in the joys and the celebrations and everywhere in between. Jesus is already parked among us as people, abiding with us. And it is that abiding then that gives us the ability to ask that great question of how does our presence change the world? Because it does matter. It matters when we show up and are present, simply present with other people, because in our presence is that presence of grace that we have been gifted with. One of the great blessings for me of technology in this day and time is that when you are going someplace where parking might be a challenge, you can often buy a parking pass in advance, right? You go to buy the tickets and you can also add on a parking pass. And that has eased my stress so much to know that when I'm going to this thing that I really do want to go to, I don't have to say no because I'm worried about where that car is going to park. When we gather in worship, we gather around this font. It is like a parking pass that reminds us that there is already space for us. That Jesus abides with us, parks with us, is present with us, and makes space for life for each and every one of us. So we don't have to worry about carving that space out for ourselves or wondering what is in it for us. Jesus has already gifted us with that life. And that then frees us to be present with others, to carry that gift of grace we've been given, and to just live in that space of fruit bearing that Jesus does in, through, and among us every day. Amen.